you.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. So today, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction before I go into introduction of our guest speakers. My name is Naya Chejene, and I'm the Executive Director for Montgomery County Food Council, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys. My background is in public health, and I'm coming from National 4-H Council, where I led a national health initiative to improve food insecurity across about 53 communities in the United States. And to do that, we worked with about 23 land-grant universities. And one of the things that I did was to tell the story of the work that all these 23 universities had done, what kind of interventions they had implemented in those different communities. And I always say, if you don't tell anybody anything, or if you don't measure anything, first of all, if you don't measure it, it did not happen, right? But I think there's something powerful about combining numbers with a story, talking to people with lived experience, and kind of putting things together, whether for advocacy, whether for fundraising, or whatever it may be. And so I'm really excited to, kick us off on this storytelling event today. This is brought to you, this virtual learning opportunity is brought to you just for our partners really across food system sectors. MCFC, whether we're looking to promote programming or advocacy or systems change or reaching our funders, we're always recognizing the need for effective storytelling skills. So I really hope you all tell your own stories in a way that respects ethnical boundaries and reflects equitable considerations, and you're able to really, galvanize all the great things that are happening in your own space. And so I really hope you have fun and learn a lot during this impactful storytelling workshop. And so I'm going to introduce our guest speakers. We have Latoria Pierce. Latoria Pierce is an award-winning storyteller, marketer, and business tech leader, and she's dedicated to impact-driven initiatives. Over the past 15 years, she has successfully elevated stakeholder and community engagement by crafting compelling narratives for global brands, for nonprofits, and for startups. So we welcome you, Latoria Pierce. And then we have Shelly Ray Roddick. She is a principal at the Taft organization, and since its founding, she has specialized in leveraging over 40 years of experience to assist mission-driven organizations such as us and you, our partners, in identifying and securing sustainable financial resources through strategic planning, nonprofit marketing, development, and communications. And so thank you very much, Shelly, for being here. We appreciate you. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Elizabeth, to get us going.
Thanks, Naya. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I just wanted to say quickly, please, we want to get everybody's questions and thoughts addressed and answered today. So please feel free to put anything you are thinking of in the chat, and we will make sure to have those questions answered. There'll be plenty of time at the end of the presentation. If the presenters feel a way to weave that into the course of their presentation, of course they will, but we will be keeping an eagle eye on that chat. So please put your questions and comments in there. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you all for the pleasant introduction, and thank you to all of our participants who are attending today. Again, I'm Latoria, and partnering with Shelly has been a pleasure. We are very excited for the experience that we're offering today. It's really a journey through the key pieces of storytelling, but even more, we hope to equip you with the ethical tools that help you to not only tell better stories, but to be sure that the narrative is effective, that it's told with integrity, and done in a way that prioritizes dignity, respect, and authenticity, or in other words, with an ethical lens. So excited to get started. Now, while there are some evergreen principles when it comes to effective storytelling, there's no one way to tell a story. So the goal is not to tell you all how to be like the perfect storyteller. There's some individuality to that piece, but we've drawn from good data and, of course, lived experience and how we've helped other individuals, communities, and organizations to tell stories, to make our best suggestions. So we hope that from our time together, you'll be able to glean what you need from what we offer. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Actually, no, let me throw in one other detail. So we're going to kick off with a discussion to provide some of those tools. Following that, we'll do kind of shake things up with a group breakout and then come back for an all group Q&A. So let's get started. So just a quick quote to capture, I think it's all encompassing of how both Shelley and I look at storytelling. And as I'm chatting, I'll let you breeze over the quote. But I think the part that stands out the most to me is the end of Annie Nyman's quote when she talks about, after we present this story, being able to help our audience or our listener return to their own world changed by the story. So we think about the effectiveness of a story and its impact, even more driving those things from an equitable lens. That's really what we want to focus on today. And that leads into our first point. So I know we got a few things going in the chat, but I want to keep that space warm. When you think about, and this is for all our participants listening, when you think about telling a story, I want you to put in the chat 1 to 2 words that describe the first action that comes to mind for you. Is it talking? Is it a platform? Is it listening? So go ahead and just drop, I'm going to just take a quick little peek there, but go ahead and drop just a couple words of what you think of when somebody says, hey, tell a story. I got listening, lived experience. Let's get 1 or 2, connecting, creative. This is good. All of those are great, and they tie into the most important part, which is reflecting. To reflect, of course, we have to listen. I think a lot of times when we think about storytelling, it seems very action-oriented. It's lights, camera, action. That's what we're told in the movies, but really it starts with this reflection piece. Before we think about how to craft that blueprint to make sure it's an engaging story, we think about using those ethical tools. So I like to call them an ethical fine-tooth comb or an ethical lens. There are 3 key action items that you want to do, and we try to simplify them here. To create that effective but yet ethical story, you want to define, identify, and assess. So what that means is define why you want to share the story. Because sometimes we just know we need to say something, but there should always be a purpose. What's the heart of the matter? Identify the intended impact on your audience. What do you want them to feel? Do you want them to be inspired? Do you want them to be concerned? Because sometimes that is the case. Motivated, more involved. And then assess the integrity of your call to action. What are we asking, and what do we mean to say? This is a space where when we're thinking about that call to action and its integrity, words matter. I've seen cases where sometimes it's like, we know that we want to ask for one thing, but we don't want it to sound that way. So instead we find a bit like fluffier words. But if the integrity's there, you can say what you mean to say, and you can ask it directly. So define, identify, and assess. Now, once you've done those 3 activities, that gives you kind of that ethical foundation. Then you can get more into that tradition of storytelling. And as we know, every story has to have a proper beginning, middle, and end. And we'll talk a little bit more about like mapping out the story. This actually is a process that comes naturally for most of us. Think about when you talk to a family member and maybe, or a colleague, and you relay an experience that you had. You know where you're starting based on how the story kicked off, where there's a point of change, our turning point, which we'll talk about, and then kind of how it wrapped up from there. You do want to have distinct, full-formed, for lack of better words, characters and settings. Now, in a story, a character is actually just who are you focusing on? Who are the important stakeholders in the story being told? And then every story has that show of conflict and then the presented resolution. And this is the turning point where that problem is solved by a solution. Here. The second piece, tying in with some of the amazing words you all dropped in the chat, as you're reflecting, you then want to understand. And these are all positions of listening, because when we think about the story told, the audience matters. So we want to make sure that the information is tailored to their lived experience or their relatable experiences, their communication styles and how we relay that story, and even more their values. But how do you glean these things from your audience? How do you come to know what they're comfortable with, or where they're confident, or what they're passionate about in the story that you tell? Well, when we go to listen, there are different frameworks for doing so. So research and interactions is actually one of my favorites. And this could look like many different things. It could be something as simple as a survey. You could do a round table or an ideation session. This could be a coffee chat. You can decide based on the content of the story and just kind of some of the emotions that come with the behavioral response as well, that you want to do a one-on-one talk and interview each of your contributors before you go into filming or producing the full narrative or story. Of course, we addressed this earlier, and it'll probably be a running theme. Active listening is so important. It's making sure that there's no distractions around you when you're collecting this information, especially when you're engaging contributors who will be a part of the narrative. Making sure you have no distractions. And so that may mean if you're interviewing somebody as you go to like glean data and information to craft the story, you may not want to ask questions and take notes at the same time. So maybe you have a third person who is just as comfortable to the contributor that's there on the call to be the note taker so that you can listen closely. And then, of course, when we think about an audience, sometimes, like I know for me, my mind can kind of like narrow in on kind of like who might be seen more or pivotal. And it's literally working a muscle to remember to keep a very broad lens, because when we think about relatability, people's experiences in life, and especially communities, there's always more than one vantage point or perspective. And so diverse representation is key. And I'll go ahead and let Shelley keep us moving forward.
Okay. So really, storytelling is about connection. And I added this line, money moves in connection, because that's much of the work that I've done for most of my career, is helping people find the funding that they need to do the important work that they do. And no matter who is funding you, there is some connection that has been made. Generally, it's a personal connection. And so I just wanted to add that to our slide here. But my feeling about storytelling is that we want to talk from the aspect of the people who are being served. Most people really don't care that much about a beautiful new building or new infrastructure or new equipment. What they really want to know is what's going to happen in that building. How is it going to help? Whose life is going to be improved by whatever it is that our goal is? You know, maybe we're raising money for a building, but that's really secondary as far as our story is concerned. The story itself is not about our organization's needs. It's not about how effectively our organization can reach its goals. Of course, there's a time and a place for that. We all know that. But that is really not the approach we want to take for effective storytelling. The most important question in the minds of anybody listening to your story is this one here. Why should I care? The central desire of most human beings is, I want to be moved. I want to be inspired. So that's really the point of our connection with storytelling.
Okay, so these next two slides are actually two of my favorites. As Shelley and I were thinking about how to make sure we really lean into the heart of the matter, in addition to like understanding the framework for effective storytelling, it's making sure that it's dignified, that we bring that, as I call it, ethical fine-tooth comb and ethical lens to the table. So Shelley introduced me to the dignified storytelling principles. And when I saw them, I was like, these are fantastic. They're all principles that I knew, but I love that this handbook puts it in simple form. And I'll go through the first 5 of the principles, and as Shelley wraps up the final 5, we'll have the resource for these on the screen and later to be shared. So when we think about crafting this story, we talked about the beginning, the middle, the end, listening, active listening, and making sure that we have an inclusive process when we think about the contributors involved. But once you have these different components, and like Shelley said, we got the buy-in, everybody's ready to go. We're prioritizing the connection piece so that the authenticity can be there. How do we make sure we don't miss any steps? And so the dignified storytelling principle is a framework for action from concept to completion. When it comes to crafting the story, it makes sure that respect, transparency, and of course, dignity are at the forefront. So just to do a quick overview of these, starting with principle 1, it's not my story. The concept of this is that you want to involve your contributors as co-partners or co-creators. They're not just interviewees or subjects of the story. They should be in the kitchen with you, kind of, dropping ingredients into that homemade recipe that is your story. You want to make sure to pass the microphone to these contributors so that their voices are not appropriated, silenced, or controlled. We've all been there where maybe we were in a room, and even if it's just somebody close to us, like my mother does this, like she'll recap a story and she'll say, well, then Tori said, I'm like, wait, that's not how I said it. You left out the key part. And so it's like, let me tell my part. We want to make sure that these contributors are able to tell their part and in their own words. The second principle, I do no harm. The storytelling handbook actually really emphasizes this as being one of the most important ethics to every single action of the steps. And it's applying this ethic of do no harm at every step of the process of crafting, creating, and sharing this story. And simply put, it's making sure that safety remains for all folks involved, and that it's prioritized as a requirement. We want to consider the feelings, the culture, the mindsets, and more of the individual there. So like when I read this one and I was like, note to self, I want to make sure I ask that. But it made me think about when I invite people to my home. The most important thing to me is that you feel comfortable here and that you can come from behind the veil. And so I have a number of things that I do to create that comfort, whether it's offering, water, tea, or organic lemonade when you come in the door, or letting you know where the blankets are when you sit on the couch. And the intention behind all those actions is I want my guests to know that I'm making space for them and they can be themselves. And so for me, that's a part of like protection, or in other words, applying that do no harm ethic. I try to do the same thing when I work in professional spaces and build stories. I don't just go straight for getting the information, like let's sit down and connect, as Shelley was saying first. So think about ways to make sure that at every step of the process, you apply the do no harm ethic to all actions. The third step, we are all multidimensional. This principle is about capturing and sharing the full picture of a person or community versus zooming in on one aspect of a whole. So this is the space where inclusion and diverse aspects of people's lived experience and or those communities can be fully represented. So in essence, you don't want to leave parts of the story out. You capture all the variety, the personal and professional involvements, so that it's not like a one-sided story. So for example, if I'm the subject and we focus on, LaToria is a storyteller, and we go through all these experiences about me being a communications professional and storyteller, there's a whole backstory to that. There's a broader and expanded view that comes from even my personal life, being the sister of 4 other women, and what that looks like. You want to be inclusive of that full experience for your contributors, are the folks who are a part of this story that you're putting together. The fourth thing, consent is more than paperwork. Here is where trust can be built or it can be broken. So this principle highlights the importance of making sure your contributors, these are like the folks who, this may be a client that you're going to allow them to share like their testimonial through the story, but whoever your contributor is, you want them to understand the when, where, why, how, and what of the body of work. And also be very confident that they have the power to exercise their voice on what is okay and not okay to share, and any preferences about how long it's shared. And then that agreement and respect to their voice is then captured in paperwork form. So it's confirmed in like a terms of agreement. And this could be like a media disclosure. and more. And again, we can share some resources with you all as far as like the documents themselves. But before that paperwork comes, there should be a conversation. The fifth principle, I am biased, and it says repeat. I know everybody's on mute, and you can do it in your head or you can mouth it, but I want us to all say that phrase on the count of three. I will lead it. 1, 2, 3. I am biased. And it's actually human. It can be conscious bias, it can be unconscious bias, but none of us can escape it. We all have it. And so these amazing principles in number 5, they're making sure we understand to first do the hard work of reflecting, going back to that word, reflecting on and recognizing our own biases and positions within our existing power dynamic. If we know we have the authority to approve or disapprove that final production or narrative, and to influence what's put there, we have to kind of like pull back the reins and make sure that, again, we're making room, we're passing that microphone. And the reason why this is so essential is because, well, one, the many reasons we talked about before, like making sure folks, their words are expressed in their own words, that it's a safe space, there's inclusivity in the story. But even more, when we think about having an impact, having narrative change, and making sure that we are not perpetuating stereotypes, the only way to do that is to share the floor. So no matter what our authority is in the process of crafting the story, at some point we may be influencers, at other points we need to be the student, we need to be a learner in the process, because we don't want our biases to end up dictating the story and kind of having the opposite effect of being positively impactful. And Shelley, I'll let you take it.
I'm going to take it. Excuse me. I am recovering from a flu, so excuse me if you're going to I'll be so glad you're on Zoom and we're not face to face today. So number 6, I do my homework, and this is so important. The people who you're interviewing have a full background, a full life. It is not just this moment in the story that you're telling, or this moment of difficulty, or this moment when they came upon your organization. And it's very important to give some cultural and background information as you're telling the story, and also to honor the person who you're talking to by giving background information and making sure that they understand that you know something about the situation that they came from and that they're facing. I am empathetic, and this is really obvious. I love the way they worded this in this is called the Dignified Storytelling Handbook. This is just a great touch point. If someone were sharing this information about you, would you be comfortable with the way you're being depicted, or someone in your family or someone you're close to is being depicted? And I think that's, that's a good way to look at the information that we're sharing. Number 8, I protect others' data like it's my own. That just goes without saying. And there are legal restrictions for protecting data. And of course, in this day of social media and data leaks and so on, we know how complicated that can be. So we're very careful about protecting data. And the other aspect of that that's so important is we want to agree in advance with people that we will use their story, A, for the purpose that we're using it, but B, for a certain amount of time. And it is very important to give a time limit on that, because you don't necessarily want somebody's story to be out there in the public view for an unlimited amount of time. So that's important. Truth over headlines goes without saying. Accuracy and authenticity. The old journalistic line, if it bleeds, it leads. We're not going there. And a story can change the world. To sum this all up, I just want to say that we did a lot of research, and I was amazed at the wide birth of literature, research, and information that's out there on this aspect of storytelling, on ethical, equitable, dignified storytelling. And we're using actual research, data, and information. Of course, we all have our own empirical observations, but we're using this data because it exists out there and it's an ever expanding amount of information. And I wanted to tell you all that after the presentation in a few days, we're going to put together an entire resource sheet for all of you with the information and resources and research that we use for this report. I went down a lot of rabbit holes doing this research. I dragged Latoria down a couple as well. And we were really amazed at the amount of information that's out there that's, been thoroughly researched. So number 10 sort of sums it all up, that dignified storytelling, it really empowers your contributor by looking for a bright light in everybody, people who are coming from a place of connection, partnership, and respect. We know that issues of human rights are present everywhere, in every society, in every community. And the truth is, we're all responsible and we're all impacted by issues of human rights. The dignified storytelling really affirms that each of us has the power to meaningfully contribute to positive change within our families, within our communities, and really within the wider world. And so in order to do that, we want to prioritize content that illustrates people and stories that are caring for each other, that are leading the work, and that they are being agents of change. And at the same time, of course, we're going to acknowledge the barriers that people face and the complexities of a real life journey. We know that change and growth are never simple. It's never linear. Dignified stories really attempt to honor the whole journey. So let's go. Yeah. Okay. Have you all heard of this term, poverty porn? I've hesitated to use it, but I think it's really important. It comes up so much in the literature. So poverty porn is really a case of exploiting a person or a community suffering, and it objectifies, it dehumanizes, and what it does is it really takes advantage of a low point in someone's life. We've all had low points. A low point in someone's life, a difficult time in someone's life is not unique only to people who we are serving. And if we do this, if we exploit this time, this difficult time in someone's life, rather than present a whole person of worth and dignity, going through this rough time, it really misrepresents poverty or hunger or prejudice. It misrepresents inequities, discrimination. And it also disregards the societal complexities at the root of these issues. So sometimes there's a case of an urgent crisis. That's really the exception. And we still wouldn't call it poverty porn, but this is an appeal that diminishes rapidly as audiences either become apathetic or just turned off. They can't see the suffering anymore. It's compassion fatigue. And for me, a blatant example, and I was just thinking about this, of poverty porn is, I am assuming you're all aware of this iconic photograph that was taken during the Great Depression. It's titled Migrant Mother. It was taken by Dorothea Lange, who was actually a government photographer. And it's a photograph. It highlights the face of a woman in a beautiful light. And she looks totally destitute. And the backs of the heads of some of her children are sort of nestled into her shoulders. I think many people have seen it. I probably could have pulled it up very quickly, but for decades, that photo has been exhibited and used without ever identifying the person in the image. Her name is Florence Owens Thompson. She was born in Oklahoma. She fell under very hard times in the Great Depression, wound up going to California, becoming a migrant farmer. But even after she was identified, and this was decades later, the Library of Congress, and I think they own the copyright to that photo, they have it in their archives, they titled the photo Destitute Pea Pickers in California. And you know, I think that title remains to this day. In 2008, finally, now this photograph was taken in 1936. In 2008, CNN somehow found the children of Florence and was able to bring them together for an interview. And several of her children were able to speak. And finally, they were able to show the full humanity of their mother for the first time it had ever been shown. They talked about her strength, her courage, her tremendous sacrifices. They talked about her backbone. And I think really the most telling comment at the end of that interview, and I think you can probably still get it, her son Troy said, "For Mama and us, the photo had always been a bit of a curse." So that's our example of poverty porn. And by the way, Dorothea Lange's photos are on exhibit. They have been at the National Gallery right here in DC. And that photo is part of it. So if you're in this area and want to see the original, I think it's still available and probably well worth seeing. Of course, now we have a different lens to look at it through. Let's go to the next one. Okay. So, of course, you know, we're not giving into this concept of poverty porn, but there is a tremendous amount of research in the field. And we, as I said, we'll be sending you this research, but there's a study that the University of Chicago study of food system organizations did. There's research from Feeding America, and there's research from the USDA Economic Research Food Security. And all of them report, all of them, a pervasive example of imagery and language in our field, in the food system field, focused on lack, what we call deficit-based thinking. There's not enough food, there's not enough space, there's not enough equipment, not enough time, maybe volunteers, not enough funding. And this is pervasive throughout the system, throughout our country. And a far more effective form of communication, they found, is using strength-based language. So look, we all know this, right? In the US, we know there's enough food for everyone. It's not due to lack that people are food insecure. But when audiences get, and we all know that in the field, but when audiences get the scarcity message, what happens is they focus on the symptoms of poverty and lack, instead of gaining a deeper understanding of the issues and the necessary structural changes that have to occur in order to address it. And when we utilize language and images that highlight strength, another interesting thing happens, the research shows. We actually promote a positive perspective in not only how we perceive others, but how we serve them as well. So the asset-based approach acknowledges the inherent wholeness of individuals who engage with us, and it emphasizes more of the abundance of resources available for fostering positive change. You know, scarcity speak may prompt short-term aid, but generally this aid fades very rapidly because it's mostly invoking emotions of sadness, despair, anger, and these are not emotions that inspire people. Asset Speak really fosters enduring support, advocacy, because it allows for an entire spectrum of emotions, and especially emotions that serve to inspire. Okay, we said there are no superheroes. This is the savior mentality. And it's very prevalent in our field, in all of the field of nonprofit endeavors. But we have to remember that when we're telling stories through an ethical lens, when we're dignifying the storyteller, it's not just about heroic efforts, right? The funders, the donors, the legislators, and so on. It's really all of us. We're moving forward as a collective. And it's so important that we don't make anybody else the hero of somebody else's story or of our organization's success. So we're going to embrace the community members themselves, everybody working at the grassroots level, and you, the people who are running these organizations, the backbone of our community and the backbone of our nonprofits. We're all the heroes of these stories.
Okay, so with that, hopefully there were some great takeaways and gems you've been able to glean. We want to put things in living color. And so we're going to do a group breakout exercise. And before we do our breakouts, I'm just going to do a quick run through on the instructions. And this screen here, we're going to drop, if you can help us, Elizabeth, a link in the chat. It's going to give you access to this slide for when you exit the main room and you're in the individual group, so that you can use the screen for both the instructions and the prompts. So the goal of the small group will be to have you all on the call, the small group participants. Each member will suggest 1 to 2 themes that represent or align with your organization's mission. We saw a little bit of this in some of the pre-registration questions we asked you all. So we have a bit of understanding, but you can think back to maybe what you wrote when you did that registration, or as you hear other folks in the group share theirs, some themes will come to mind. From there, within that small group, one person can volunteer, or the group can create a brief short story sharing a scenario when your organization or an organization services directly addressed a client's need. So this is that turning point. Somebody walks in the door with a problem, and your solution either provides a gain or addresses that pain. So now, once you've identified that turning point and you have a small list of those important themes, you want to go ahead and apply the ethical filter. And you're going to do that through these 3 prompts here, those 3 bullets. So I won't read through those because you'll have access to them. Again, feel free to use that link. You'll be able to view this slide outside of the main group. And with that, Shelley, unless you have anything you want to add, or Elizabeth, that you want to say on the housekeeping end, I think we're ready to break out.
Great. I will be placing you all in breakout rooms, and we'll pop in and drop the link again to the exercise instructions in case you don't need them. And Shelley and Latoria will be popping in and out as well, just to make sure everyone is on track and answer any questions. And remind us again how much time you intended for this
Yes.
exercise.
Let's shoot for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, we want everybody to have a chance to, first of all, talk about the theme that you're going for in your organization, just in 1 or 2 words, but then to decide on a real story that you have either used in your organization or that you would like to use, or something that you're considering would be helpful, knowing someone that you're serving who's maybe offered a story, and let the group decide. Probably easiest to decide on one, so you can all focus on the ethical lens of this piece.
All right, I am going to send everyone in again. Any questions, feel free to pop back out into the main room if you have questions as well. I'll be hanging out there and directing everyone who's homeless. So bear with us. And
Thank you, Elizabeth. Just wanted to close. with my remarks, it's, we're telling these stories for a purpose, and we know what our purpose is. And I think I have a prejudice, and my prejudice is that if you're working in this field, you have the moral authority to make a very specific ask that comes from your passion. And look, none of us are working for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, right? We're not looking at galas and parties and events and so on. We're doing this from, many of us, from the passion. Some people call it a calling. And so this is just, asks are as individual as all of us, but you do want to end your story with some call to action or ask. And this is something, just a thought, this is some kind of language that I use sometimes in a very general sense. So I will say, this issue that I'm working on has kept me up at night. That's why I'm doing this work. That's why I'm devoting my life to this work. And we're building this, you fill it in, your program, your project, your coalition, and so on, to address this issue that I'm so passionate about. And we are fiercely committed to making it possible. So the ask is, would you like to learn more about what it would look like when we get there? Does this keep you up at night? And if not, is there something else keeping you up at night that's not being addressed by our community? But we would like to know if you'd like to hear more about our vision. So I leave you with that, but do not forget that there's an ask at the end of the story, and you want to inspire people, move people, and call someone to action.
Thank you, Shelley. In my closing remarks, this is one of my favorite quotes, and it kind of brings things full circle to what I was saying at the start of our time together today. We are all storytellers, and it's almost like this innate gift. And I think when we pair that with compassion, but most importantly, making a connection in the process of building the story, it always produces something that's just magical. And magic can look like many things. It could be happy and inspiring. It can leave some folks, walking away in tears because you've told them something that they didn't see. And that's still impact. But the ultimate goal is motivating them to take a step or an action to do something different for the well-being and the care of someone else. And so I heard a few things today in contribution, and I was like, they've got it. Like, I think that there were maybe some good reminders and new ideas and best practices shared, but I could hear storytellers from the different contributions, and happy to just further support you all and equip you all with some tools to help you do that even better. So thank you so much for your time today. On our final screen here, just some information to stay in touch with Shelley and I. I included my LinkedIn because it's the one space I check daily. Of course, in addition to my email, but I get a lot of those. So, but if email is better for you, feel free to ping Elizabeth and she can get you in touch with me. Shelley gave us some options here. We got website and email. So feel free to screenshot this screen. I think we may share, of course, the presentation and the slides, so it'll capture this information as well. And we appreciate you all.
Thank you all so much for attending and for contributing so fully to the conversation. We have a few extra slides. You're going to be getting them. Do you want to scroll down, Latoya? Just some inspirational slides that follow this that, of course, you will get. One of them was a discussion about compensation for telling stories. We don't have time to go into that.
They're hidden, so it's not going to pop up. But it's
not popping up. Okay, you will get these additional slides, but the issue of compensation is a long discussion in the research, and we'll send you some links to talk about whether it's ethical to compensate people for their stories.
Thank you, Shelley and Latoya, just echoing all of the sentiments in the chat about our gratitude for your expertise and for sharing with our community. And we just ask everyone to be on the lookout for a follow-up with all of this fantastic information, and look forward to your participation in future Food Council events. So thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Continue telling good stories. Take care. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.